All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Wally.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to having a chance to connect with you. I mean, someone I admire probably more than anyone in the hockey world, Ken Dufton, has always spoken highly of you. I actually remember you presenting, I think it was at my High Performance One certification. You had came out and spoke, and you said some things that still resonate with me to this day. So I'm looking forward to being able to share some of your coaching journey with a lot of other coaches out there because I think you have a wealth of knowledge to share and it's only going to benefit people. So, why don't we start with the story of how you got involved in coaching in the first place?
Well, I think coaching sort of became a part of me. And formally, I'll go back to when I finished playing minor pro hockey. And I had to return to, after finishing that time, I returned to Calgary to really pursue my vocation, which was teaching. And I started out in special education and I went to a school at St. Mary's High School. I had transferred there after 1 year with the national team. Prior to that, in Winnipeg, and then a year of pro. I was working in special ed, but I had a phys ed degree and I had an education degree. So I walked into the phys ed office to introduce myself because being a jock, I wanted to meet the other jock teachers, and
Yeah.
I just let them know I was available. And at the moment I walked in, the department head was on the phone and I overheard him saying, "We're canceling the junior football team, John. We cannot find a coach." And I didn't know him. I've never met anybody before. I put his hand on his shoulder and said, "I'll coach." And it was a reputable sports school. And the football program was a junior football team. I'd never coached football, but being the fool I am, stuck my put myself out on a limb and said I would coach. And he stopped and he looked me in the eye and says, "Are you serious?" I says, "Yeah, I played 6 man in Saskatchewan, but I took a 12 man coaching course and U of S. I'll do it. I'll take it on for sure." That was it. That's how I got started, really in coaching. It was just sort of one of those moments in time where, yeah, I was going to later get involved running hockey schools, and then, that's where I got my start. I didn't know a darn thing about football coaching, especially, but it was the most rewarding year and experience. He passed me a bag of 6 footballs and said, "Here you go, and we might find one assistant for you." So away I went, and I tell this story at coaching clinics. It was my best coaching experience ever, a 0 and 7 year. And you might wonder, holy cow. But I'll tell you, the first game we lost, it was over 40-0. And I was learning on the fly. I didn't know much about football. I managed to borrow a playbook from the U of C because of a friend that I was playing senior hockey with in Calgary. Mike Barnett, he's actually was Gretzky's agent later.
Wow.
He gave me the playbook. He said he would help me out, but he never showed up at practice. Just just gave me the playbook, and away I went. And after the first loss, I recall this like it was yesterday. Walked into the meeting room on the next Monday after the Friday game, and here were 40 bodies, sitting in the room, heads down, depressed. And I looked at them all and I smiled and I said, "Guys, get your heads up." I said, "I don't know a damn thing about football, but I'm going to learn, and so are you. And we're going to get better. I guarantee it." And that was it. We just progressed the whole season. The losses just shrunk. We got competitive. And the last game of the year, we were ahead 15-7 against the first place team in the final game. We ended up losing it, but nobody quit. I played everybody. I rolled them through the lineup, 40 players. Some coaches will two-way their best players, and I used that philosophy, and they really responded. And I loved the year. And after that, I was hooked, and I coached football, wrestling, and track. And once I transferred schools, those were what I would call formal coaching experiences, not hockey, but coaching males and females at track and field. Just pardon me, but I just had to hang that up, and hopefully my wife would pick up the main line.
No
Okay,
problem.
okay. Hello. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on a Zoom call. Bye-bye.
All good, all good.
There's another hockey call from one of my friends in Prince Edward Island, so no, all good. But as you can see, it led to just so many different coaching experiences. When I went to another high school, I started to coach 3 sports. I became a department head, and you were sort of, I would have coached anyway, but I was responsible for selecting coaches, getting coaches, recruiting coaches for all the teams. I took on 3 sports year round. And during that time, I was always involved in the community with my 3 daughters, voluntarily coaching sports they played, whether it was softball or fastball. Um, and I coached, assisted in ringette, but I also got involved in the hockey community. And that's probably a more interesting story where I was running hockey schools, being an ex national team player, a former pro. I started up this little private enterprise. And in the summer, I would run a 3-week hockey school in August, preparing kids for the season. But I also ran a conditioning camp in the evening for pros. And back in the day, the pros never conditioned, they never trained. So that 3-week period became their training opportunity. And I really got a chance to experiment with the highest level of male players. And I did have a few females come out because I was asked by Shannon Miller, head coach of the national team at the time, to look at a goalie. And that goalie was Sammy Jo Small, and I invited her to one of those pro tryouts, and she blew me away. And I eventually convinced her to give up track and field if you want to go to the Olympics, and she did. But
Wow.
it's just a heck of a story, the story of coaching guys hockey and getting started. I was asked to coach a Bantam AA team in the quadrant of the city I lived in. And it just happened. And this story is another one that just changed my way of coaching. I inherited the best team in the city because at the team, 2 Pee-wee teams in the quadrant I lived in competed in the city final the previous year. And I inherited this team. Of course, I had a background. I was running hockey schools. I thought, wow, what an opportunity. And I was in 4th place in November. It was a shock, like, ooh, what's going on here? And I was frustrated to the point where I just didn't know what to do. I'd never felt so bad about not being able to have a degree of success. And to me, the most important thing was that I asked for help. I phoned the coach of the team the previous year, and I said, Ken, and he was a father of one of the boys that played on my team. He said, I don't know a darn thing about hockey. Well, I said, I never played in it, but I just arranged games. We might have had 6 practices. We went outdoors a lot and played on a pond and in the flooded area in our city. And I just patted them on the back and cheered them on and opened and closed the door. That's all I did. That was all I needed. I said, wow, what a wake up call. I knew too much. I was overcoaching. I was overtelling. And I started to let them play. And I got into the small area games, the half ice, circles, battles, and fun games, and made it fun again. We managed to rebound, recover, and we won the cities and the provincials with that Bantam team. And I believe we beat Ken Hitchcock's Bantam team in the final. So it was without that experience of it doesn't matter about X's and O's. It's just letting them play and discover how the talents they have within them. And I learned that year, and it lived with me ever since, in hockey in particular. And every sport I coached, wrestling was unbelievable. Probably my favorite sport because it was one on one.
Mm.
You never had to deal with egos. You're on the mat against somebody, and there's no place to hide. And there's no excuses. And of course, school sports, very little interference. So I didn't deal with parents, and I never had to in my minor hockey coaching experience had any problems whatsoever dealing with parents. But mentoring today, it's a different ball game. But it's all added up to an awful lot of experience. And when I got near the end of my teaching, I was Shannon Miller called me and asked me if I would be interested in taking over the oval program because she was going to go to Nagano and the team would be centralized. And she wanted the oval program, which was really, she had recruited some top players from Western Canada and even Manitoba, Jen Botterill, to come and train at the Olympic Oval at Calgary. And at that time, I was sort of, it was just an interesting opportunity. At the same time, I had been asked by Dave King to work in Japan on a part-time basis, and I got a permission from my school board to mentor the Japanese from 95 to 98, going in there for a month and coming home for a week and in for a month to mentor and evaluate their hockey development, but to mentor the male side to prepare for the Olympics. And while that was going on, in 98, I was back and forth. I was involved with the female program at the Oval. I was still working with the Japanese, and I ended up taking over the Japanese women's team at the Olympics. I thought I might be involved with the guys, but Dave King was coaching with the Flames and lost his job. And I said, you better grab this guy right now. And they did. And he transitioned me into the female side. We still are good friends and work together. And when that was all over, that's when I applied to work with the national team and applied for a position. And I did acquire a position, assistant coach in 2002. After that was all over, I expected to go back to the Oval and coach, but they got another coach while I was away. And I went to Hockey Canada and said I would never have taken the job if I didn't think I had one at the Oval. So I sort of embarrassed them into hiring me. And I stayed there for about 10 years until the heart attack and 3 years after that recovery. But my whole time there was dedicated to female hockey. I'd become attached to it. I found them much easier to coach. It was like coaching wrestling one-on-one. Every one of them was different. Every athlete wanted to know why you're doing what you're doing. You had to be able to coach. You couldn't blow smoke. You couldn't just yell and tell. You had to learn to answer questions, and you had to learn to explain things and justify things. So it was a great experience, but that's quite a long story.
It's a fascinating one, though.
Yeah.
There's just so much. I have so many questions. Okay, so I guess a spin-off to that. So obviously you got involved following your playing career, and that's interesting. I didn't know that your first sport that you coached wasn't hockey. I think a lot of people naturally progress, from playing at a high level to coaching within their sport. I think it's really interesting that you had a diversified coaching experience. And I think it's good for a lot of coaches to know that, you don't necessarily have to coach in the sport that you played or that you're most familiar with. like a lot of coaching skill sets are transferable to different sports. And it also just highlights that really the technical tactical elements of the game are just a small portion of what it takes to be a good, effective coach, right? And have a positive impact in the lives of the athletes you work with. But yeah, so given your vast experience to date, why coaching? Why coaching? It's one thing to get into it, right? Like to tap that guy on the shoulder in the first place and say, I'll do it. But then all of these years later to still be involved so heavily. Why?
Well, I think when it started at school, when I was teaching history uh, classes at St. Mary's before I went to Father Lacombe, where I was the physics department head, um, the kids want to be there. They want to play a sport,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to connect with them and be enthusiastic about it. I remember Dave King telling me when I was teaching, I was also helping him with the Olympic 88 Olympic team and the national team as a skills coach while coaching high school sports. And he had coached the same thing in Aidenbowman Collegiate in Saskatoon. He had coached football and track. And he said to me, he says, Wally, he says, you have to be careful when your players go out to the field for practice because they'll get run over by teachers that are getting out of there as soon as the bell rings. And that resonated with me. The most valuable time I spent was really on the playing field, whether it was football, track, or wrestling. They were there. They wanted to be there. The connection was just natural for me. The other side, the biomechanical side, and this is really important because I coach wrestling and because I coach track, football, sports I knew nothing about. I had to learn how to teach. And I learned about teaching skills, identifying skills, correcting skills, breaking them down, whole part, whole method. Absolutely critical. I learned back in the day, I took the coaching education programs, which at that time involved biomechanics, fundamental teaching ideas, and they're no longer a part of the specific hockey programs. And it's a missing piece, which I think has resulted in all the specialists making a living teaching skills, which coaches could teach to a better degree. And that's one of the vacuums that I'm attempting to influence. You say, why do you coach? Well, it's to make a difference. And it's about the sport, it's about the players participating and the coaches coaching, being able to teach a little bit better so that they can connect the importance of the skills to the performance of the drill, which will translate into the game. So that was really a huge part of it. But as you mentioned in the question, why coach? And I think you can ask any one of the people you talk to that are still coaching. It's the passion that comes from working with people that are passionate about wanting to take that course, that class, which is a sport. It doesn't matter what sport it is. And the same can be true in drama and music. And people have a passion to do things. And it's those extracurricular times where phys ed to me is just provides that opportunity to connect with the extracurricular, as do all the programs in the schools that you have. They're very valuable in the growth of the person.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? I think the opportunity to connect to someone through a mutual or shared passion, it can really change the context of the learning experience or just the impact that you can have as a coach working with someone on something that they already love. It kind of changes the nature of the relationship a little bit. But okay, so I guess looking again at your coaching career, we talk a little bit about, because the point of this podcast is to try to help mentor coaches, right? And look at some challenges that they face or some reoccurring themes that kind of come up in conversation. And one of them is those initial few years in coaching. Like when you first make the transition, a lot of coaches have also played a sport, right? They're used to being on the playing side. And then when they transition into a coaching role, there are certain challenges that can come with that. Like, what was your experience when you made that transition early on? Were there any particular elements of it that you found challenging?
Now, I think the biggest thing was, especially not knowing anything about the sport, I found that easier because I had to learn.
Mm-hmm.
When I coached hockey, I thought I knew it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with an ex-player, especially on the guys' side, playing with Father Bauer, playing pro hockey, running hockey schools. Yeah, relatively speaking, I knew a lot more than a lot of people, but I never knew how to coach. I didn't have a clue how to coach. I could teach skills, but that ability to make them apply and be fun and a part of competing and playing, uh, that's the art of coaching. You've got to be able to connect the dots. And right now, and as I observe minor hockey practices, I don't see a lot of drills accomplishing a purpose to connect the dots that are going to happen in the game. And that's why I believe the small area games philosophy, if you can't teach skills, do what that coach father advised me to do, just have games, pat them on the back and let them play. Keep it simple. The structure is simple. It's so simple. I hold my hand up in a claw in front of you, and you can see a 1-2-2. That's a forecheck.
Yeah.
And I say, where's first, second, third? You can count to three. When you change, you go out and have that shape, first, second, third, relative to your position. And when the puck's on the one side and it moves to the other, and or somebody falls down, who's first, second, third? Reestablish your shape, cut the ice in half. I do this every coaching clinic. That's the first thing I do. And I said, now forget about all that. You've got your system. You don't need to practice it. They will, FIO, figure it out. And I picked that FIO up from the Newfoundland female minor hockey under 18 team. I went out there years ago and I did a forecheck mirror drill on the ice where we simulated who's first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and puck's over here, who's closest, and they walk through it. And I have a video of it that I put in the curriculum that I shared with all the branches so they would adopt this kind of a simplicity. And it can become a 2-1-2 very quickly when you recognize the D to D pass because the F3 will rotate into. So it's just so simple. It keeps it simple. Let them play. Don't overcoach. Don't yell and scream and tell them what to do. And what you have historically is coaches yelling and telling all the time, and players never get to think for themselves. That's what I did when I started coaching. And by learning the idea of asking more than telling and letting them think and figure things out, they learn to play and have fun. And they're not fearful of, oh, am I doing what you want? Because that Bantam team that I coached years ago was trying to please me so hard. They practiced so well. They weren't playing. And when I let go and let them play, that's really when I learned to coach. So keep that in mind with all the X and O people, all the former players are getting into the game. You might be better off with a parent who can pat them on the back, acquire a little bit of teaching ability and understanding of a framework of systems and structure. But it really is important to understand the art of coaching.
Mm-hmm. I guess that kind of answers my next question, which would be, in those first few years, your philosophy. as opposed to now? I think you just kind of touched on it, but maybe if you could summarize it again for everyone, like what is it that you've most changed your mind on? If you look at what your philosophy was at the beginning versus where it is now.
Well, I think at the beginning, it wasn't my philosophy, it was my understanding of how to do things. I didn't know. I did it the way that it was always done, the way it was done with me. It was yell and tell, teach, no, 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 this way, that way, versus letting them the discovery method of learning, which is the 21st century method of coaching today, and letting them figure it out. And I've had this conversation recently with Lisa at Ryerson Coaching over in Hungary about Thomas Pacina's coaching team, Czechoslovakia, the female team. And he and I worked together coaching the oval team. And we really hit it off together. And he was a teacher, but we both were people who learned how to let them figure it out. And part of this experience, and another interesting story, is where we acquired this figure it out idea was Joan Vickers, Dr. Joan Vickers, a professor and a researcher in decision training and decision making in sports and in the armed services and the police work, had a class observe me run a practice with the oval team. And I got called into the office at the oval, and I was really questioned on the way I ran the practice. And I went to talk to Joe, and everything I did was telling them on the ice at practice. There wasn't enough asking. There wasn't enough discovery. Every drill was deliberate. Pass made here, shot made here. There was no thinking. It was mindless, repetitive practice. So that, after going through the Bantam experience and overcoaching at practice, I almost had to reinvent the wheel and go back to recognizing the importance of it. It's called delayed feedback. And one of the things I apply mentoring today is for those beginning coaches to go from yelling, prevent yelling and the body language and the negativity, to telling, and go from telling to asking. When you begin to do that, you begin to empower the player and understand what they know or don't know, what you have to teach. And they'll acquire it by that method of coaching versus the telling method of coaching. So go from asking to telling, going from yelling, which on the male side has always been the case, and telling, go from telling too much, and I call it constructive. Telling is good, necessary at times. The art of how much, when, right stuff, right amount, right time. And asking is the ideal thing, the art of the line of making that connection with the player or the coach, if you're a mentor, is making sure you're asking them questions, because you know what it is that they could do that would really help, but you don't jump to that. You have to sort of get to that through an inquiry method.
Yeah. And that is an adjustment for a lot of coaches, right? Because I think when you think about the root reason that a lot of people coach, it's to help athletes. And the perspective of how you help is to provide answers, to provide solutions to their problems. But you're right. Like, I remember putting up a thing in my office that was it? Tell me and I'll forget, teach me and I'll remember, but involve me and I'll learn. Right. And that's what you're trying to get to is it's not about you having the answer. It's about your athlete remembering or retaining the solution. And a big part of that is having them be involved in the process of figuring out what that solution is. But it's an adjustment for sure. For sure. All right. So you had kind of alluded to this too earlier in the conversation, but I guess, again, just to summarize it, you've coached at the high levels in men's and women's hockey. What was that transition like when you transitioned from the men's game to the women's game?
It was, it wasn't difficult for me because coaching school sports, having worked with all sports, and also I think having been well educated, taking theory certification courses and different sports certification courses, um, it it wasn't difficult. The thing that was impressive was you could coach, you could teach, you had to coach, you had to learn, you had to adapt to what suited the needs of the players
Mm-hmm.
and accomplish what you want in the end. So that it really wasn't difficult. I was never a yeller or a screamer, but I was a teller. I was the guy who had all the answers, and the kids could nod their head and they would agree to it and they go out and try to do it. But it wasn't that effective. And I discovered that in my first year of competitive hockey coaching, which was a good thing. And you tend to forget it when you coach. You think it's all X's and O's, but it's all emotional intelligence. And that is something that I think females generally have. The their card and quality of what they do and the way they do things is the emotional aspect of why they're doing things. And that's the essence of, I think, good coaching and good leadership. It doesn't, it applies all over the place so that, um, this applies societally to the whole way we run our businesses and we run our companies and we coach our teams. And I think the influence of sport and the influence of women in sport leadership can play a huge role in making things better.
Yeah, I love that. It's very true. They need to know why. And because of that, it makes you a better coach because it's creating an environment where you're constantly questioning why we're doing things. Like you can't fall down that rabbit hole of just doing things to do things, which isn't a bad thing. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of look at your personal experience as a coach, right? Draw on some of the things that you experienced kind of behind the scenes along your coaching journey. So one thing I think a lot of coaches kind of have an active mind. It's really hard to shut it off. There's always, a new idea or something to worry about or something to celebrate going on behind the scenes. If you were to look over the course of your coaching career, are there any themes as to kind of what kept you up at night?
Um, I never lost sleep over coaching. It was sort of X's and O's, thinking of what to do or plan a practice. When I coached major junior hockey in the Western Hockey League, uh, I was a pretty good sleeper and I had a pretty good perspective on why I was coaching. And my philosophy basically was grounded in terms of playing everybody and developing everybody to play a role, learn a role. And I may have been too generous at high levels with that, but I never lost sleep over it. I spent more time as an assistant coach thinking about what to say, what not to say to get my point across so that it would be weighed and the power and the authority is with the head coach. And so going back to the national team, women's team, I really respected the nature of our group and the importance of everyone involved in a team, not just the head coach, but the assistants and what they're thinking and doing. And in our case, I probably had more hockey experience, not necessarily coaching, but yes, I did with different sports. So I felt before I took the job, I just wanted to be sure that I would be, my input would be considered, but I do respect the final decision maker. And so that was the only thing that I really had to think about is what am I going to say? Am I going to say anything? And I managed to really get a great deal of satisfaction from playing that role as an assistant. I think the problem as a head coach is I wasn't listening. And that's the habit with most of us, is that when you're talking, I'm thinking about what you're not thinking about or listening to you, but I'm thinking about what to say. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
what's in my mind, not what's in your mind that I should be hearing. And I think that's what I would say is the biggest weakness, is the leader has to really hear those around them, whatever level.
Mhm.
And leadership has to come from the bottom up, the inside out, before it comes from the top down.
Mhm.
And I think that it's all connected. It all makes sense. So I'm really thankful for the experiences I've been able to go through teaching and coaching, because it's really satisfying to be alive today, given my health situation, but to be alive and be talking to you about these kind of things, because they matter. There are things that could make a big difference. And a podcast like yours, and I've listened to it, it's really excellent. To anybody who listens to it, you're going to get some nuggets to take out of it that will make you think and possibly apply and do something a little differently and make things better. The good of the game, I call it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, coming from you, I mean, that's one of the highest honors I could receive. But I think that's the goal, because it's like you said, it's for the good of the game. So for me, I just look at it, and the quality of the experience that the athletes have in the sport will be predicated on, the quality of the leadership that they're receiving. And coaches need coaching, right? And sometimes that's where the line of teaching and instruction and improvement is kind of broken. And that's kind of the point where we're at. We're trying to make sure that coaches have that support and the help and the mentorship that they need to continue to grow and evolve, so that they can help their athletes continue to do the same. And that's such an important part of the game, right? So again, I guess kind of following along the same projection later in your career. So as you said, right, like as you've accumulated a lot of coaching experience, or maybe in relation to other coaches, when you've been at it for a long time, a decade or two, and you're nearing the end of your career, what are some challenges that might be unique to that? So we talk about challenges in the first few years that maybe hinder a coach, but are there any challenges that come along after you've gained a lot of experience that can hinder your ability to coach effectively as well?
Well, I think most of the experience I've most of the learning that's occurred for me has been as a coach mentor, a formal paid mentor, where you're observing other coaches. And one of the tasks that I did in minor hockey coaches in a community outside of Calgary that we had a contract for with P3 Sports, the logo I've got on here now. Um, we I was able to bring in about 15 excellent mentors. And of course, they were white haired guys like myself. And we didn't have any women. We could have had a few. They might have done a better job than we did. But that was the point. We would watch and observe these coaches. So what I observed was um, the feedback, and I went through this exercise all the time. And I would go on the bench and I would keep track of all the communication that went on with a positive specific check mark, a positive general check mark, a constructive specific check mark, a telling, and a constructive general. So good job versus good pass, good stick on the little detail of why it worked. And then if the tone of voice got a little loud and frustrated, it was negative. And it just the negative area would receive dots. So I was keeping track of feedback. Just be aware of how you communicate. And I felt I never had a problem with that personally, but observing it on the bench, I observed that it was a problem. and they had to be aware of it. So it was about self-awareness for them in terms of what they were doing. And I did it for one period. They asked, I told them what I was doing, and then I would video a little bit in the second period from the bench, and then I would go up top in the third period. And what I videoed on the bench was a little bit of tactical stuff, but it was the conversational stuff that you could hear in the background. And I would share it with them after. And one of the things I created, I wrote a module for the Theory 2 program that I believe they've inherited in the Theory 2 program, which is a compulsory task for a coach to record himself or video record and audio record themselves on the bench for a game and break down the feedback accordingly, just to be aware of yelling and telling and asking. And that makes you a better coach. Once you've done it and you see it, you make adjustments. So that task is something that we try to implement, but it's something that I think needs to be done. I watch professional hockey, the NHL playoffs now, and I just watch coaches on the bench. I watch the changes of players, their communication with one another. They're looking at iPads, talking to each other. The ice stuff, well, most of the guys that I talk to are watching the ice stuff and the X's and O's, and I'm looking at the behavioral stuff going on out there, the frustrations, the highs and the lows, and how they're handling it. So and that's really at the highest level. I think the coaching staff of the two teams in the final are pretty well advanced in the art of coaching. And I actually record post-game interviews because they're coaching when they're being interviewed, because their players are, of course, will be listening. And you can see their degree of frustration. And Cooper is pretty impressive because he's answering all the questions the right way to get a response from everybody in public. So with with any coach at any level, I think the perspective of why you're coaching is most important. Know why you're coaching. Why are you coaching? Just ask yourself that. And at the university level, these are student athletes, and you're coaching because when they're done hockey, they're going to be making livings and doing things. So if you put all of your marbles into winning the championship and forget about those other aspects and don't look at their academic achievement and their lives going on and all they're going to have to deal with. This is true with any team at any level, but particularly I think you have an ideal environment to do the right thing in a coach education environment like a university setting. So it's a great place to grow up. And I think coaches at that level who focus on the perspective of why they're doing what they're doing will do a far better job and be far more satisfied with what they're doing. And I call it know what you're doing. And there's a mission statement exercise process that I've taken over 100 coaches through during the COVID period to encourage them to do it. And you've had Matt Holberg on, Lisa Haley on, and they've both done this exercise with me. And I think this exercise is just a good reminder of that's going to give you the beacon to follow as you coach, which will give you the direction, because we get caught up with the score clock, get caught up with the outcome. And in minor hockey and at the university level, the shortening of the bench is the hugest destroyer of belief and getting the most out of everyone. And there's an art to that. And of course, there is roles and earning your role, learning and accepting your role. But shortening the bench to win too soon it's demeaning to those that don't get to play. And on the female side, even those who get to play all the time, it bothers them because they're more sensitive to the team concept.
Mm, that's a great point. So I would take it that maybe you're a New York Islanders fan then?
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very much. And I thought Montreal was they use a lot of players on their bench, and I cheer for those underdogs that manage the bench that way. But I know Barry and Trotz with the Islanders and the way they coached, but that's the essence of what they've done. And when I translate this to the national team that we were involved with in 2002,
Hmm.
I wouldn't have taken the job if they didn't agree with my philosophy of managing the bench versus shortening it. And I don't know that I think they've lost sight of this in the program, because I understand at some training camps that they've had with the national team over the past number of years, um, when they're having their inter squad games, they're shortening the bench. And
Hmm.
shortening the bench in inter squad games is not a chance to inspire or transmit belief, but it's pigeonholed it into players' roles too soon. And in 2001, when I took the job with the national team, Tom Rennie uh, gave us a form which had how to structure lines for competition. So your first line had to have certain kind of offensive players, your second line, and your third and fourth were checkings. And I looked at it and I said, no, this isn't for female hockey. You're going to do everything to be everything you want to be in the first half year. You're going to roll the lines.
Hmm.
And you're not going to try to create combinations that are going to get you an immediate result. You're going to learn to develop everybody. And so I got them to agree to manage the bench so everybody plays special teams, both special teams before Christmas and after Christmas. And during that season, they morph into power play units, PK units, but everybody gets a major role task.
Hmm.
And you balance the ice time to the point where people feel valued and understand and appreciate their roles. That's the art of coaching. And when I've observed novice 7 games where the double shifting of the top 2 players and some players sitting out for 14 minutes
Oh my gosh.
occurs, and they're not even at the age where they're mature, and some of them haven't played yet. So that's happening. That's what's going on in minor hockey to various degrees, and I think that's actually what I've dedicated my life to, is that particular exercise, and appreciating that the way to win is balance the minutes with everybody feeling valued. And so the 2 teams that get to the Stanley Cup final, they were able to last 4 rounds of the playoffs. Everybody feels valued and everybody contributes. And you want that to happen on every team.
Hmm.
So to me, it's like rolling the bench the first half, and second half managing the bench and morphing them into valuable roles that they feel good about themselves in.
Oh, it's such a good point. And okay, so I have to ask. I know we're going off on a little bit of a tangent. Okay, but what's your take on the Leafs then?
I think the Leafs are discovering it because they've created a Pandora's box by the way they've created a gap of talent. But in the way they've coached, I like the philosophy, because the the so-called star players, they're not that way. They've been bred that way. When they were in minor hockey, they were double and triple shifted.
Yeah.
And when they were coaching the NHL, but some coaches, they got double and triple shifted. And when I look at those teams, I see Toronto attempting to make everyone more useful, more valuable, be more of a team. And that's at that level, it's an art because you end up creating discrepancies in salaries, expectations change, and it's not just the coach. There's a management, there's an ownership group, there's the outcome end of it, which is a real problem. But you still have to have a philosophy and a perspective that's consistent with what's going to get the best end result. And I think Toronto's striving towards that. Their playoff result, as disappointing as it was, I like the response of Shanahan and Dubas talking about staying the course and following the plan because the monster has been created by the way organizations are created at that level and then where they're coached. The art of getting the most out of everybody, managing the bench to value everybody. So everybody's a part of it. And I'm just talking on the ice. I'm talking a whole organization, whether it's your trainers, your office staff, your equipment manager, your managers, your equipment managers. They're all on the same page, understanding they're valued, they're doing something useful, they're listened to if they have concerns, and trust and respect are the key words in leadership. And organizations that create that within themselves, the entire organization is critical. Then within the team, of course, the players and the coach and the staff, the immediate bubble of that team. When you have trust and respect, you never win or lose. You either win or learn. And I think Toronto's still learning.
Yeah. I love that. On that note, it's funny because much like you, sometimes I will look for things beyond the game. And I don't know why, but I found it caught my attention when they had their picture taken with the conference trophy, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like they were going to take the picture and then the guys were like, no, no, no. And they wanted everyone on the ice with them for the picture. Like, all of the support staff, the equipment guys, everyone, they wanted to make sure that they were in that picture and part of it. And it's little things like that that can kind of shed light on the culture of the organization.
You said the word culture. It's the first time. And that's it. Exactly. And I never thought of that until this moment. I knew they came out there, but I wasn't connecting the dot of why they're successful. The fact they did that's why they're successful.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure who or how or why it happened, but organizationally, whether it's at a college, in a department, all sports, how do you create that culture? And I do know that the successful teams that have maintained a culture with that kind of ethical, valued empowerment background of appreciation, they tend to have a lot more success. And their experiences are ongoing. They're almost eternally successful because they know why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah. And how they're going to do is going to emulate the why. So that's what's occurred. Now in 2002, the biggest thing I got out of the Olympics, I remember after we won the gold medal, we had a lot of adversity, 7 penalties in one period, and the Americans none. But when we were on the ice, the first thing that came to my mind was I was so thankful. We had 9/11 occurred. We didn't even know if there would be an Olympics.
Yeah.
And playing for Father Bauer, his only dream with the national men's team was to be in the Olympics. We didn't have a hockey team. So he got a hockey team to participate in the Olympics because what that emulated the rings of the Olympics and the continents of the world was that's what sports are for. And so that big image always stayed with me, that 1 year of college, of international experience. When I was on the ice, that's what I thought of. Thank God we had the Olympics. It wasn't that we won the gold medal. I would have been just as satisfied if we had lost because we'd played so well, we'd done everything we could. There was no reason to hang your head. You can't control the outcome. You can only stay with the process, stay with your philosophy, step by step, attempt to achieve the outcome. And I think that's the essence of what coaching's all about. It's a process thing. If you look at that outcome and you try to coach to win and do everything to win, it can be a very demeaning, frustrating experience.
Hmm. Yeah, like you said, right? You don't have control over the outcome. So if you invest all of your energy and time in something that you don't have the power over, it's yeah, it's a tough way to lead, and it's also that messaging will be passed on to your players, right? And
Yeah,
in any facet of life, that's a tough way to get through, focusing
yeah,
so much on all of the things that are out of your control. But if you start from within, you focus on what you can control, your players will learn to do the same, and that will benefit them well beyond sport. But okay, so to shift here a little bit, I know you have been a meaningful mentor in the lives of so many athletes and coaches. What about impactful mentors that you've had in your own experience?
well, I'm glad you asked that question because when I was growing up as a young boy, I had my older brother, both brothers that I admired and looked up to. The oldest one was the athlete of the family, and he was a great role model. He became a teacher and a phys ed teacher, and um, played junior hockey, and just that the way he conducted himself and played was a part of me. But then when I got into coaching, there were three people that, and I'm sure there are many more, but three people in particular that in that era of coaching, I was assisting Dave King, and he was the best X and O guy I ever saw. And he coached with to win, he coached with values, but he could teach. So he was a mentor in the importance of making things simply understandable, just like to figure it out on the forecheck. That's how simple it can be.
Mm-hmm.
And working with him for so many years and being an eye in the sky during the 8 Olympics, but being on the ice with the athletes, working primarily with defensive tactical skating with defensemen. He was a mentor. The other was George Kingston, coaching at the U of C. He was the unbelievable coach. He was one of those guys who let him play, and I wasn't a let him play coach. So at times I questioned that in my mind, and I didn't provide the moral support that I could have for what he was doing. But they played, and they played very well. And he was always grounded with the good of the game approach, not the outcome. And the third, and I think the most influential, Father Bauer overlaps all of these guys because of the national team, and he wasn't a coach. He was just a manager that had a culture with the national program. But Claire Drake was the third one who had the combination of X and O's and ethics and values and perspective. And so the mission statement exercise that I've been conducting, it's a part of the U of A program in the female and male side. And I'm not 100% sure, but I believe the exercise was created by Dr. Murray Smith, who was in the sports psych department at the U of A back in the day. And it's a simple exercise that they conduct every year. And when I did this exercise with Howie Draper this past year, he was politely, agreed to do it with me to see how he felt about it. And they've done it. That was what they've done. He said, Wally, we've already done this exercise. And the first question in the exercise, it's so simple. I do it every coaching clinic, is write down 3 things you want to accomplish this season. So the coaching staff does it. And the players do it. and the parents do it. And then you sort them out in terms of values and outcomes. And you draw a line between the two, pointing to the outcome is the process. So you literally draw an X through the outcomes and focus on the process. And that exercise is a simple thing to go through. And how he'd already done it. And I called him this was shortly after they said they weren't going to have any games. And he said, Wally, we did the exercise 3 weeks ago with our staff. We're going to have the players do it online. And he said the three things we agreed upon were number one, coach improvement. We were going to get better as coaches. Number two, player improvement. They were going to get better as players, whether it was skills, tactics, whatever. They were going to have an opportunity. And the third thing, which blew me away, was community.
Wow.
One word. So if that in fact is your culture and approach, the results that they've achieved over, I don't know, 29 or 30 national championships on both sides speak for themselves. And in that is the managing of the bench is part of the art of it. And I know talking to them, the inclination of the staff is to want to shorten it at times, but the reminder that be patient, stick with the process, get everybody to feel valued and buy in. And you can manage the bench a lot better when you've done that.
Yeah. It's so, yeah. Yeah, it's funny because you say that, right? So that exercise, having coaches write down 3 things they want to accomplish this year, it automatically just makes me think how many coaches would write something that's outcome oriented, right? Like have a winning record or make the playoffs or win a championship. But it's a really good practice, right? Because I think that's the goal, is to have the answers be more value based. But I don't foresee a ton of coaches' minds automatically going to that when they think about goals or objectives for the season.
Well, this is why I've tried this exercise. We created it, MJ, in 1990. Dave King and I were working with the national men's team. Now, Hockey Canada was an independent body with the national men's team, having offices at the Saddle Dome, support from the owners of the Flames to create a coaching center, which is called the Center of Excellence. Dave King's office was there, and that's where I went after work in coaching school sports and spent time for clinic preparation delivery. But on the other side, the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association had its theory program, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all we were doing, Dave was providing technical support for the certification program. That wasn't his main job, but he just did it because they had a laboratory with the national team. And he wrote a Goals One video, which was offensive hockey, that became a part of the certification program at the CHA. On defensive hockey was Goals Two. But in the 1990s, insurance rates were going skyrocketing because of hitting from behind. So the CHA got a hold of Dave and said, would you help us? And could your next video be something related to body checking and respect in sport? And Dave sat down with me and tasked me with writing a script for that. So I wrote a module, Goals 3, which was really about checking. But the technical side wasn't going to be the way to establish respect. And so chapter 1 became this module, mission statement. Know what you're there for as a coach, as a parent, as a team. And it was this exercise.
Mhm.
Chapter 2 was fundamental sports psychology, emotional control, control what you can control, an ideal performance state. What is it? How do we learn to, what routines do we have? How do we cope with simple? Because it's just the first module. And goal 3 was the X and O side, free puck battles, free puck races, protecting the puck, play in the danger zone, all kinds of drills and battle ideas,
Mhm.
how to be absorb checks, how to protect yourself, but how to respect making checks. And that package was to be, completed. And I felt it would help solve the problems because of the mission statement exercise. All the other things have happened. Everybody's playing with sports psych.
Mhm.
Everybody's doing all these skill things and becoming better checkers, and it's more respectful.
Mhm.
But the mission statement, especially at the minor hockey level, if it begins too soon, it's just totally out of whack. So it didn't come to fruition because what happened, the national team folded. Dave King went to professional coaching. Hockey Canada became the CAHA, and there was one center of excellence. It became 4 or 5 regional ones. And that module slipped through the cracks. And one of the reasons was, I think the person who actually played with that mission statement module was the director of the first center of excellence. And he was in charge of making that module come to reality. But he said he felt it was more of a brochure thing, not a video thing. But it didn't happen. I think to a degree, the checking things happened and sports psych happened, but the mission statement thing didn't happen. And I just found out that it's, this last year because when I did this exercise with Dan, who once he retires is going to get back into coaching, he he told me, no, Wally, it didn't slip through the cracks. We decided the CHA when the 5 centers of excellence that it had to be a brochure. So I think in my mind, it's mistakenly, but they're the ones making decisions. Um, they're right. A brochure is useful, but if you do that exercise at first year of coaching, you're coaching and you got to do it. And you're mandated to write a mission statement to submit yourself as a coaching staff before you get credit for coach 1.
Mhm.
And then in coach 2, you take it to another level. It's 45-minute module. And I've done it with every coaching group I've been with. And I feel over time, the coaches will do it with their teams, parents, players, and a parent group will write the mission statement for the team.
Mhm.
And they'll make a fridge magnet, put it on the fridge with a 15-word value-based statement as a reminder of the process
Mhm.
that they're going to adhere to. And they're also, the coaches will recruit parents to get on the board, volunteer, so that we have a perspective-oriented leadership from the top down. And that's my vision, and it continues to be to this day. Uh, I've had all kinds of conversations with so many people at different levels, but organizations are big.
Mhm.
The ability to make this happen again, I'm just at a roadblock with people at the highest level nationally in hockey or in any sport, and provincially in Alberta, particularly in hockey, to say, let's pilot this project at least to see if we can get it off the ground. And haven't gotten anywhere yet because they're too busy. Everybody's too busy keeping busy.
Well, yeah. You know what the irony is? right? Because I think about what you've just said. And when you go back to the checking, you create a checking clinic that teaches people how to check properly. But in my mind, you're treating the symptom, you're not treating the issue, right? And
You
and
said
that
it.
that's the goal. So
Make sure you edit this part of it,
yeah,
please, because that's it.
yeah,
You're dealing with the symptom, not the cause.
yeah. And
You've nailed it. Thank you.
of
That's
course, of course. But I think that's what it all goes down to, right? And the irony is the reason why the organizations are so busy is because they're stuck investing a lot of time and energy into putting out little fires that are coming up all over the place
totally.
because because this isn't being addressed right out of the gates. Because the irony is if you had every coach that was mandatory that they started with getting really clear on what their purpose was or what their why was in terms of what they want to be involved in. And like you said, that mission statement, what that does is it really brings the whole team's attention onto what's in their control, right? And make sure that we're not being consumed by all of those things that kind of send us down rabbit holes and create issues within the culture of a team or within individuals' experiences as part of sport. And it's such an easy solution, but you're right, it's a vicious cycle, right? And it's going to take an opportunity to kind of break that trend and put this in place. And the other thing I love about what you said was the involvement of parents, because in minor sports as a coach, like you're going to spend so much time with your athletes, but the parents or the guardians of your athletes play such an important role in their experience, and you collectively need to work together. So having them involved and definitely educated on what your philosophy is and having some sort of understanding and unity on what that is to create a good experience for the kids is really important as well.
Yeah.
But it's all about identifying the problem. It's kind of about identifying the solution or laying the groundwork for it to be effective before all of these problems arise versus a problem comes up. Okay, now we have to try to fix it.
Now you said one thing. You said my solution. It's our solution.
Yes.
With the exercise, you've empowered the parents. They have input. The players, they have input. And the
Yes.
coaching staff. Everyone is on the same page. And everybody will say what they want and say the right things, but they don't do it. But that rule of law on the mission statement, the values of what you're doing, why do you play a sport? That's what it's for. And it's something that, to me, it's a no-brainer, but I've done this for 40 years, since 1990. It's been like, wow, why didn't it happen? How can it happen? How can we do this? Because you can't start at the top and mandate it. There's all kinds of great leadership work being done at the top, and all that leadership group is in their little bubble and they all agree with the right things. But then what happens in hockey is starting at the bottom, the team will blame the association. The association will blame the city, like Hockey Calgary, will blame Hockey Alberta,
Yeah.
will blame Hockey Canada.
Yeah.
All of us are to blame.
Yeah.
Every one of us. Adults are responsible. Leaders are responsible for this.
Yeah.
So that to me, really, if you could get me a copy of the video so I can edit it, which you've said, you've expressed it in a way that if I share what you've said and the way you've coined it, is I've tried to do the exercise hoping people will go, wow, we got to do this. And most of them have said that at the moment. But then when time passes, it's forgotten. I've done the exercise with Matt Holmberg, and I've tasked him to do it with his players. And he can have it done online with his parents.
Yeah.
Before the season starts. Now, I don't know if they'll do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
At the time, he thought it would be useful. So I'm saying, rather than start later, let's start with, you have to be educated to do this as you grow up coaching, so that when you lead and you're at that level and you've done this all your way up the ladder of coaching,
Hmm.
it's automatic.
Yeah,
There's there's just no question.
absolutely.
So it's tough to start late and implement because they've all been coached by different coaches, having different organizations. Like what
Hmm.
happens in hockey, organizations, every 4 years, the kids are out of it. New parent leaders come in with their philosophy. All things are going to be better. And
Hmm.
they're all outcome oriented. They
Yeah.
say they aren't, but they become, and they forget. They don't have the patience to accept failure, accept losing, to learn.
Hmm.
Give them time to develop, give them time to morph into roles. And that's human. That's human nature, you know.
Yeah. No, it's, and you're right. It's, I guess, because I think about it. So the other thing I do on the side is I'm a certified mental performance coach. But for me, I became that based on some of my experiences in hockey and definitely my experiences coaching. So, coaching at the higher levels, coaching, especially in the university world for several years, you have a lot of athletes that come from different experiences, and you can see firsthand how some of their experiences have been broken along the way, right? Or they've formed some maladaptive strategies because of their experiences. So, um, like for me, and it's kind of alignment with you, I think you have to be clear on what your purpose is. And I think that should be a natural part of the equation for everyone's experience in sport, whether you're an athlete or whether you're a coach. I think that should be worked into the equation so that that's kind of an expectation, because when that's lost, everything else will be lost in succession. But with athletes too, it's the idea of empowering your athletes, right? And helping them understand how to kind of coach themselves through things and be their own leaders as part of the journey. Like, 90% of the game is mental, yet there's so little time and energy invested in that part of it for athletes and coaches alike, like how to deal with stress, how to manage all of those things. But again, the whole thing is trying to come up with a system where people have healthy formative ways to deal with the challenges that arise through sport, and they're given those tools from the get-go. It's not, oh, now you're broken, okay, now you need to see a sports psychologist. Oh,
Yeah,
now you're broken, oh, now you have to work with a coach mentor. It's like you said, trying to change the environment and make it healthy from the beginning.
correct. No, that I'm glad you said that because that's what I've been trying to say and think, but I have never been able to express it that way. It's it's so simple. It's like right there in front of you. Um, we saw that, and when you mentioned who are my mentors, and I mentioned Claire Drake, Dave King, George Kingston, we were that was us. That was our era. That was the way we did things. We didn't need a mission statement. No, Claire took it and applied it
Mm-hmm.
with his experience coaching. And I'm going to share a story with you on Claire. Um, who's an ex-teacher coaching hockey at the U of A, and he also coached football because you could. When hockey finished, he went over to football.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened one year, and Claire lived with this model, and they did the exercise, and his football team won a national championship. And during uh, the pardon me, the hockey team won a national championship, and he started coaching football, and the coach got sick. He had to take over the head coaching position, and there was an issue behaviorally with the quarterback who was a star in his language
Mm-hmm.
on the practice field. And Claire sent him off, talked to him after, says, "This isn't the way we do things." He had established that understanding. And he's the only coach that I know in North America that's ever won two national championships in the same season in two different sports.
Wow.
So having coached college football and hockey, which he did, and winning, the reason for it was the philosophy, the perspective, and the dealing with that behavior in the way he did, professionally, clearly. Expectations are everybody came into they're going in the same direction now. And that's why, when you've grown up like myself and witnessed that and are aware of that in that era and that time frame, I just keep bringing the story up to hope that this exercise might uh, be implemented. You can make a difference with your podcast.
Mhm.
People are going to get it here and there. But the power of a sport governing body, and I don't care if it's basketball, hockey, wrestling, and I've done some work with the wrestling people administratively on this, trying to get my foot in the door to say, who can say we're going to do this? Who's willing to do it and
Mhm.
give it a whirl? Just try it. That's sort of where I'm at right now.
Mhm.
And knocking on the door, and I don't know how any louder to knock, but I'm going to keep knocking because it keeps me alive, and it's for the good of
Great.
the game. So,
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. But we'll have to talk more offline about that because I know I have some ideas that would align with the stuff you're talking about. So
well,
that's
make sure we connect on phone, put our
mm,
speaker phones on, but let's definitely do that
yeah.
because I could use some help, some ideas. Uh, I mean, I've worked with there's two ladies at sports law,
Hmm.
Deanne Belle LaRouche is one, and Lauren. Uh, there's another lady. I've talked to them. I've done the exercise with them. I was hoping they would get my foot in somebody's other sports door because they're doing this kind of. They know it. They have this philosophy. They're doing what you and I know needs to be done
Hmm.
at the top level.
Yeah,
And I'm just saying, how can we kickstart it, you know, start the fire at the right level?
that's right. That's right. I'm right with you. Oh my goodness. Okay, so just a couple more questions here for you. COVID, you've been coaching for decades. I'm sure you thought you've seen everything and then all of a sudden we have a world pandemic upon us. I guess from a personal perspective, what have you learned about yourself as you've navigated through COVID? And then the second part would be, what do you think coaches can take from this experience to make themselves more effective coaches coming out of it? Or maybe even something they should be aware of coaching post COVID?
Well, I think they've learned something from it just by going through it. It's just like coach, you're going to learn.
Hmm.
You're going to learn or you're going to quit,
Yeah.
which I almost did. And so I'll give you an example. I did the mission statement exercise with a midget double A coach in a community outside of Calgary. And it was online. I did the exercise with him and his assistant. And then he told me what he was doing, how he was using COVID. And the best exercise, and you'll love this, that he did once a week, they have a Zoom call and they have to cook. A player will have to cook for his family online, and everybody else, the players will cook at home for their families, following the lead. Now, it might be every 2 weeks, but they did it all season. And I have the video of it. He sent me the link of the session where they prepared a meal. The parents sat back and had a glass of wine while the kids were cooking, wearing the carton, boy,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. It was amazing. So you had the one lead player, chef, walking them through. They had to have the groceries and all the preparation of the materials, and everybody cooked their meals. And the head coach did the first one, and then I don't know if the assistant did the second, but it just it became it took on its own life. The parents of that team had called it the best season ever without playing a game.
Wow.
So the power of COVID, it did some good. You can communicate more. You can do some real team building things like that with the families engaged. And imagine what would happen if you did that in season. Like, boy, I'd cut back the season game number for a cooking thing
Yeah.
because the impact of the social bonding of the group in terms of what they're there for. Those kids are going to, those boys are going to cook some meals, which I can't cook.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's a good thing. And it's just a win-win kind of environment. So to me, in COVID, I'm not sure how many of them will continue to value this, what we're doing right now, in terms of the purpose it accomplished with your team. But those coaches who have used the technology and are using Zoom or whatever, they've developed a skill set or a tool, just like the mission box is a tool. Mission statement is a tool, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tool, a coaching tool. And if you want to get a strategy across, you can look at a video with all the kids, a clip of one highlight and say, what did you like about that? Everybody, you can get your 2 bits in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about the other team that this was a good offensive clip of ours? What about the other team defensively? How did they break down?
Mm-hmm.
And you've accomplished an X and O, which matters.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do so much more with technology. And you're looking at players looking on iPads on the bench. Kids, they're tuned into technology. So we have to keep up with kids who are ahead of us already.
Mm-hmm.
Even those players coming to university are ahead of the coaches generation
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the familiar with technology. So we have to ask them questions. We have to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
We have to share their ideas. And it'll take it to another level. I call it 21st century coaching. That's the reality of where we're at.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? I think you think of yourself as a coach, you really want to help this player grow, right, towards their full potential. And let's say that the finish line's down there. Well, as a coach, are you going to stand at the finish line and just yell at the kid, like, come on, like, come here? Or are you going to walk, grab them by the hand and then escort them to where they're trying to get to, right? Like, I think that's a big thing, is trying to meet them where they're at versus trying to tell them to come to where you are. It's really important. And for a lot of coaches, especially with all the technological innovation and everything that's changed in the way these kids' daily lives look, that's really getting out of the comfort zone for a lot of coaches. But you're right. It's so important that we do that.
Yeah. I think coaches will be better for having done it. I've said to all of them, you can do the mission statement exercise now online.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a great time before the season starts. Once the season starts, you got ice, you got practice, you got classes. Hey, whoa, do it now.
Mm-hmm.
Do it now.
Mm-hmm.
And revisit it early in the season.
Yeah.
To remind yourself what you did. In that exercise, I'll share this with you. The very first thing I do, and this is at coaching clinics, you got 25, 30 coaches. And at coach 1, it's half ice hockey. Coach 2, it's whole ice hockey. Now that coach 1, that's why you have to start it here. And now Lisa might be working on it with development 1. this ethical coaching module. I'm saying, well, you got to do it here because you don't have problems yet. There's no full A score clock. But then you got coach 2, then you got development 1, then you got HP 1, then you got HP 2. So you got that friggin' ladder to go up. Well, when they come in, the very first thing they do in the exercise is draw a tree. Have you got a pencil by chance? Have you got a pencil? Just draw a quick tree for yourself.
Okay.
And hold the picture up at above your head, eye level so I can see it. Super. Good. I got it. Now you can imagine everybody drawing a tree and looking at you and saying, you're delivering this course. So I want to do this with all the course conductors in Alberta. That's my goal. And then see if they would do it with their coaches. It's not mandated to do. It's just try it, see if it works. Because you have the flexibility as a course conductor to do the programs to accomplish what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So 30, they all hold their pictures up, look at each other's, laugh, and they say, remind me of this at the end of the day, at the end of the day. And we go through this exercise of what do you want to accomplish? Sort out outcomes, sort out values, write a mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
Do it with the parents. Parents write a mission statement, recruit them for the board, da-da-da-da. So all day you go on the ice, you've got so many topics to cover, 4, 5, 6 hours.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, they come back, you say, look at your tree. Now look at your tree, what's missing?
Mm-hmm.
Have a look at your picture right now. So
What about?
everybody's holding their tree up.
Yep.
And I say, what's missing? Look at each other's tree. Now, the first time you do this, 95% are missing this. What is it?
The ground.
No, you're missing the roots.
Ah.
So that's the mission statement.
Yeah.
So I have when I have trees for the clinic where I have a tree without roots. Then I have a tree with roots. Then I have a tree with roots and a maple leaf on the top, which is a symbol. Your team logo will become, depends on the values of your tree, your organization. You
Mhm.
fertilize it.
Mhm.
So that's the sort of the metaphor or whatever you want to call it
Yeah.
of the exercise. And it's sort of like, to me, it sets it up. It closes it. They leave. You remind them, remember to write your mission statement, send it to me within 12 hours.
Mhm.
You've got to do it with you. I'm saying before I credit you in my group, if I don't get it back, I'm not giving you credit. So you got to do it.
Mhm.
And then you're asked to do it with your staff so you get good at doing it.
Mhm.
And then you're asked to do it with your team of players and parents.
Mhm.
And then you go through your season with that mission in mind. So
Yeah.
it
I
makes
love that.
sense, but it's hard to sell because everybody is doing things and they don't take time to go through this and say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do it.
Mhm.
So how do we kickstart it? I look forward to talking to you more about it because if you've got people that might say, let's do it so it has an effect, like Kim McCullough, for instance,
Mhm.
she's done the exercise. And this is one of the things, she did it with her junior team.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if they were still playing before COVID when I was working with her. And at this, one of the players at the supper table, this got back to Kim, the daughter, and there was a boy in the family playing hockey, competitive hockey. Uh, I don't know how many other kids in the family and the parents, all at supper. And she talked about the mission statement. She educated them about it. It was like proof of the pudding, the why you do something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what we do. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
Duh, they got it.
Yeah.
So she's sort of right now the testing grounds for me with her role, because she's a mentor to a big association.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the
So
largest in Canada, right?
yes,
Yeah.
in the world, so to speak.
Yeah.
But she has, in her role now, she's coached. But the biggest thing now is that going from house hockey to competitive
Mm-hmm.
to elite. And it's the same. People think house hockey is careless. No, it isn't. Play for fun, but be responsible young people.
Mm-hmm.
Be on time. Listen,
Yeah.
work hard. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you still play to win,
Yeah.
and you're going to learn regardless.
Yeah.
But as they move up the ladder, what happens is what you're doing this for.
Yeah. I
Really.
know. I know. Well, and that's the thing, right? I think as an organization, so like you said, it's all the levels. It's what's your mission statement as an individual, what's your mission statement as a team, but then what's your mission statement as an organization? You know, there are values that are transferable regardless of the level or the age of the team. You know, if you want to build a culture around your organization, you can have that conversation. Like, what do we agree on? And then it's interesting, you know, you mentioned the tree and you mentioned the roots, and a lot of people don't draw those. And I think there's so many parallels to values, because when you think of values, you don't see them often. You know, like you talk about, you know, well, we our work, like, well, work ethic, I guess you can see, but integrity, trust, whatever. Like sometimes people will throw those words out, right? And they'll value them, but they don't do the extra step to clarify what that looks like. Like, how can this value be actionable on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Because values are those things that lie beyond the surface, and but the quality of those values determine how big and how healthy the tree grows, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you know Samantha Holmes at all.
No.
Samantha, I think, graduated from Brown University.
Okay.
Um, she played with the national team a little bit and tried out for played on the senior team and was aspiring for the Olympics. But she is now on the minor hockey, girls hockey board. Now, there's an elite board, which has its own mission statement, which has the word elite in it too many times.
Mm,
And she's done this exercise, and she called me a couple of months ago. Wally, we're going to do this exercise now with the parents, and then we're going to do it when we hire the coaches, once the coaches are hired. And I want you to do it for me, with me.
hmm
And we haven't done it. I'm waiting, but I to be able to get everybody to try to come in on a Zoom call and do it,
hmm
that's the challenge.
Yeah. Well, you know what
And
it is? It's getting clear on your why, right? Like that's kind of what
yeah,
all of this is about, the
yeah,
mission statement.
yeah,
Sometimes the missing piece for getting the commitment from people is getting them really clear on why the why matters, you know,
yeah,
because if people really understood that, like they
yeah,
understood how important it was,
yeah,
then it might be easier to commit to it.
yeah.
You know, like I guess painting a picture in the present moment of what the expense is of not having clarity on your mission. What are the problems that arise? Because you don't have to look far to see all of the problems that arise when you don't have it. But
Yep.
in the moment before they've experienced it, they don't necessarily equate, the two. But
Well, it's just like you don't call for a mentor until the crap hits the fan.
exactly.
Then you bring in somebody. Too,
Exactly.
too late.
Yep.
You're,
Yeah.
you're, you're, you're trying to get them to do what they need to do, but they don't understand the why of their doing it.
hmm
It's X's and O's, and what happens is they're being told to shorten the bench to win. They're being let go, and the coaching turnover goes, and kids go to different teams where they're going to get more ice time. And what happens when they get to college, they're used to entitlement and ice time, and now the coach has to deal with an ethical coaching philosophy.
hmm
And I know university coaches in the NCAA that have been fired because they've had to deal with that, and the parents, and have influenced the dean, and you name it. And it gets ugly on Facebook or social media.
hmm
That's the reality of what the monster that's been created is our fault.
Yeah.
And it's not the parents' fault. It's not the players' fault. It's not the coach's fault. It's leadership is we have to, and what you're doing, what I'm doing, we have to try to get through to the governing bodies that people out here understand that there's a lot of people that get it and know it, and we just want to try to help, period.
hmm
So that's what we're doing,
Yeah.
trying our best. But I like what you said, why the why matters.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's for all of us, right? It's like the reason why, when people reach the end of their life, like they may look back and have regrets or wish they did things differently, because in the moment when they're younger, they don't realize, they don't necessarily realize how meaningful and how purposeful and how important that moment is. Like you don't realize the importance of a moment until it's passed, and then you have the ability to reflect on it. So
Yeah.
I think it's just a psychological challenge that people face, but I think you also have the ability to look at the history and the experiences of other people and use that to kind of paint a picture as to why it matters. But there's work to be done. But I do think we'll get there. I think there is a shift happening. It's just like you said, finding the right people and
Yeah.
building it up and going from there. Okay, I've got one more quick question for you. And again, this ties to, I guess, the life of a coach, because we talk a lot about leadership. We talk about mentors for coaches, but the other element is self-leadership, right? Like our ability to kind of lead by example in the way we say and do things. Um, when it comes to self-care, something like self-care and the topic of work-life balance, there are two big themes that we cover with a lot of coaches. I mean, people that coach are often very passionate about their job. And in the world of athletics, it usually means, you're away on the weekends or you're not working a standard 9 to 5. Sometimes you're always on call. But with that can come the challenge of trying to take care of yourself, right? Sustain yourself and also sustain your relationships away from your sport or away from the rink. I guess what's been your experience regarding that? And then also, do you maybe have some advice to offer to coaches in terms of self-care and work-life balance and what they can do in those areas?
Well, great question. The first thing, there's a different but same need in the female side. Typically, historically, males have been the breadwinner. And as a result of that, the role that a female has played has been sort of not involved in coaching or doing other things or leading or administrating. So the balance factor here now is important on the female side. I'm just saying myself, in terms of the relationship side, I wish I had a better balance with my family life. And I think I mentioned that in what I sent to you. Um, I coach my daughters in sports, but I was consumed by it. And I am now. And it affects relationships now, but I'm more aware of it. But over time, I think the same thing will occur on the female side, that the need for balance in how much you put into everything and what matters most is the ability to really prioritize and realize the family is most important. And even preceding that would be a faith. And I think whether it's old school coaches that had that traditional faith and John Wooden, a religious background and upbringing that provided the constant, and the wife was able to accept the role delivery. I don't know, but that's something is, I'm looking at Barry Trotz, and I'm looking at these guys and say, look at where are they? What are their families doing? That to me, at my point in time, where I'm at now, that's one of the things I feel. Uh, I don't feel bad about it. I just feel disappointed. You know, I never thought of it enough as I was coaching. So it might be a module before my time, that needs to be written to prepare you for, you know, what is balance. Um, the obvious things are physical health, and but the tree and the philosophy, the whole exercise of what are you on the earth for? You're going to be here for hopefully, I think your time 100 years at least. And my time, I'm going to aim for 80, and I've got 6 left. So what are you going to do? And you just want to live life doing something useful, but not to the detriment of the health of yourself and your family. So balance, perspective, they are very important reminders. Personally, for a coach, in terms of what they're doing, how much they're doing, time management is critical. And I think probably establishing more concrete routines relative to domestic issues, like making sure you have supper meals together, whatever. But I spent so much of my time away, whether it was in Japan or whether it was the national team, that you can't get that time back, but you still have to keep the connection. And I think some of what we're talking about needs to be taught in school. They have a CALM program, which is a living life skills program in high school. It's credit and may be mandatory now, but I think these kind of courses, the self-care kind of courses, because, they do have them, but they don't have them. It's like they're there, but you just need reminders. So one of the was a principal that I've mentored. We have a Thursday morning group of coaches that Skype every Thursday morning. And this principal is on in his office, leaving in and out Thursday mornings. And he writes a Friday article, weekly article, that he shares with his staff. And I share it with the Sharks. I read it every week, but it's all about this. It's all about the year they've had, the balance they've had. It's these topics. So weekly, as a leader, he's telling his stories and reminding people and asking some questions at the end for them to think about, to look inside themselves, to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a coach recording himself on the bench, listening to who else is saying, oh my goodness, did I say that?
Yeah.
So that little exercise it's a huge one. If every coach could listen to himself, no assignment, no breakdown, just listen to yourself. And then maybe write a paragraph about what you learned about listening to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
would help. Small, simple, little thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Well, and it's in my mind too, it's the perfect opportunity to lead by example because every coach can analyze, every coach can observe, right, and watch the performance of others and take notes on that and assess that. But the idea is, video, you go over video where you analyze the player's performance. Why not have video of yourself and your own performance? You have your players set goals for the season, personal goals, and you measure their performance and their progression throughout the season. Why not do the same for yourself, right? There are so many ways that we can lead by example as a coach, not only in terms of how we carry ourselves on a day-to-day basis, but also instituting some of these guidelines for measuring our performance over the course of the season as well.
Yeah. It's walk the talk.
It sure is.
We're talking the talk here. It's a talk show kind of thing. And
Yeah.
you gotta walk the talk. And that's the essence of it. And you just have to look in the mirror more often, and
Mhm.
listen to yourself more often, whether it's meditation as a formal exercise or breathing. There's formal ways of accomplishing a more relaxed, open-minded state. I've learned so much working with the National Women's Program with our human performance leaders, our sports psych people. Um, and I've got tools that I've taken away from that I actually acquired while I was taking coach certification um, over many years, that I applied it to all of my phys ed classes. In other words, everything I learned out there, I incorporated it into a sports psych grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 curriculum.
Wow.
So these little tools became a part of their education so that when they left school and went into life or went into sport, and if it's phys ed students, those phys ed 30 or grade 12s would probably, the really good ones, would go into a competitive level of sport.
Yeah.
They could use those tools. But these are tools. Balance is a tool for the athlete. It's a
Mhm.
tool for the coach. It's a tool for the CEO.
Mhm.
And reminding yourself of that and be able to keep that is huge.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you put it that way, right? Like the tools that impact your performance. I think, a lot of coaches, when they think about what tools impact a player's performance, they would think, okay, a hard shot, good skating, this, that, and the other. And it's easy to put those things on the list, but all of those other things away from the ice impact their performance just as much. And they all need to be thrown into the
Yeah.
box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So one more question for you to wrap it up. And first of all, I think what really stands out to me about you is a couple things. A, you're incredibly modest. B, you strike me as someone who's a lifelong learner, right? You're always in pursuit of learning new things. And not only that, but you're willing to apply those things. You'll take that learning and make it actionable, right? And you're not willing to change things as you go, the ability to adapt, right? And those are things that come up a lot in terms of being able to be a successful coach and have the impact that you want. And to me, it's evident that you have those things. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for kind of, sharing stories that demonstrate, your strengths in those areas. But my last question to wrap up is if you were to go back in time to your first year, let's keep it hockey specific. So your first year of coaching hockey, and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
Well, I think I told the story earlier. I learned it that year, is letting them enjoy the game more. It's their game, they're playing. It's not my game, I'm coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to simplify that, when I hear coaches talk about my team and it's a red flag. It's our team.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, it's their team. You may be the leader of it and a part of it, but it is their team. And there is a big team outside of that of people you work with. And but the players are the ones that matter, not the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kids, the most valuable resource in our society. The players will be the coaches of tomorrow or the leaders of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've learned, and I learned it early. And that was what I learned from that one experience, which I've forgotten as I coached, that they are the most important.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be reminded of that. So whether you're listening to yourself a little more often, or whether you're open enough to being asked questions by your players, which girls like to do, they want to know why. What are you doing this for? There's a discomfort at first.
Yeah.
I mean, I can always tell the guys what to do. They'll go through the wall.
Yeah.
Girls got to know why.
Mm-hmm. And I guess also knowing that there's not a fear in like for some coaches there is, but there shouldn't be a fear in saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Like accepting that you don't have all the answers, but that you will work to find one for them.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things Mel Davis has pointed out to me when I was working with her. Uh, I I think we were both assisting Julie Healy with the under 22 team, and I ran a drill that I'd planned, and it didn't go very well. And I admitted, geez, I screwed that up. I could have done it this way. So she said, that's one thing you do is if you make a mistake, you admit it. It's not like it's going to bother you. You admit it and you move forward. And I think that's a very important quality. Um, this is another thing that relates to it. It's called your stages of competence as a leader or a coach. At first, you're unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah.
And so when I coached that Benham double A team and was losing, I didn't know what to do, but I became consciously incompetent. I went to ask somebody
Yeah.
for advice. And so that, in the sense, helped me. I made a mistake. I did it wrong. I'm going to learn from this. And when I can ask somebody, like, what could I have done better? I knew I'd done it wrong. I hadn't even thought about what I could do better, but I should have said, well, here's what I might do better. What do you think? To empower them to be a part of. I wasn't ready for that yet, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm capable of doing that now. But be careful, it takes a long time to get to that
Yeah.
level of
Yeah.
coaching. And I think that's what coaches struggle with, is you get caught up and you know when you made a mistake and you correct it. But being able to admit that and correct it and then ask for help and listen to others, that's really an art. And
Mm-hmm.
I keep in mind the meaning of a coaching team, the respect of the staff, the role of assistants, all of that relating to manage the bench, input, practice planning, their thoughts, but more important are the players' thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't we forget about that.
Yeah.
There's that disconnect.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, it reminds me of the leading by example thing. And you're right. The players' input and their perspectives are so, so valuable in terms of the team's success. And we want them to admit when they don't know something. We want them to seek out answers. We want them to be vulnerable. And it's so important that we set the precedent for that as coaches. You know, if they see us never admitting that we're wrong or trying to be authoritative all the time about everything, it's not necessarily creating a space where admitting you don't know something or admitting your mistakes is valuable.
You know, I think the players, it's one thing about knowing the X and O of what you did and could do differently. It's another thing is knowing what's going on in the lives of others that is
Mhm.
affecting their ability to do what you're hoping they would do.
Yes.
And I think that authentic respect for and sensitivity and awareness to that precedes what we're talking about.
Mhm.
You really knowing them, knowing their families, knowing the things that are going on and what they're having difficulty dealing with. And, when I did the session with Danielle Goyette, she had been working a long time with an outcome coaching philosophy. And she told me after doing the exercise, when I asked her the top three things she wanted to accomplish, not one outcome word in it.
Wow.
And I was shocked because I thought when I did it with her, I was going to change this program by saying, okay, I know you want to win a championship. How do you do it?
Mhm.
So then they go back to the process.
Yeah.
I was going to go in reverse, but I couldn't because when she did her three things, I said, what? You know, I thought I was going to do this session differently with you.
Yeah.
And she says, no, Wally, the most important thing, moment for me was uh, academic athletes. And we had 14 players or so, the academic honor rolls on our team. And then study groups that have been created where they're helping one another, peer support. And that's become the priority
Mhm.
for her coaching.
Yeah.
And she admitted when I started, it was all about, Olympic gold medal. We got to win a championship.
Yeah.
And she still knows where to draw the line about earn your ice time
Mhm.
because you might not dress tomorrow. And I think she's really been able to handle that, and her group accepts the way she handles that now because they appreciate she cares
Yeah.
about them. And that's a balance, boy, being able to be what I call a hard ass, a hard decision.
Mhm.
You're not going to play right or wrong. You have to accept what I decide.
Mhm.
But I do care more about you than that outcome. So
Yeah.
last year, I think she one of her most satisfying experience in the last season, losing out to Mount Royal, who got to go to nationals. She said how happy they were, because they had done things the right way, and she came away with it a great deal of satisfaction, not disdain, disgust, or damn.
Yeah.
Just looking forward to next year. So I learned that doing the exercise with her. There's growth with everyone at
Mhm.
every age, and that's a good example for me of continuing to learn, continuing to grow,
Yeah.
um, and I just see where it goes for her. I'm glad she's got a job with the Leafs.
Yeah.
And I was going to interrupt you earlier. I believe the first NHL team to have a woman on the bench as an assistant coach is going to make the biggest difference in the way you coach. They'll bring in the emotional intelligence, a sense of perspective that is unique, a sensitivity that is unique. I really believe that I'd have a female on the bench in a flash. And there have been other female assistants now becoming with some pro teams.
Mhm.
And there is a female coach in one sport that wanted to coach a different sport just for her development. But she would do a better job at that.
Wow.
Just like Claire Drake went over and coached football because it was a philosophy.
Yeah.
And you know, in a football team, your coaching staff, they have to teach the skills and they have to apply the skills within the segment of their team. You know, football, it's larger and it's more specific. But the course conductor is the head coach.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Well, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate you making the time to connect. We'll have to do this again because I feel like I still have a cajillion questions for you, but I really appreciate you making the time. Thank you very much.
well, I appreciate it too. Now, I don't know if you can send me not, you know, just the link, but the video copy so I can edit the mission statement stuff. Because what you've said is you've given me something to do for about a month.
Perfect.
Like I would edit your portion out of this, post it on, I have a website.
Yep.
And I would use it, but I would send it to Tom Rennie. I would send it to, you know, whoever is in the capacity of course leadership.
Yeah.
To try to sell the topic. But if you do want to talk at a later date and get together on a phone, I'll give you my landline number if you want to write it down.
Absolutely. Let me just pull it open here. Okay.
1-403.
Yep.
293 6291.
Okay.
And my cell is 7106256. And I've got your number on my phone now, so.
Awesome. Perfect.
Well, MJ, thanks very much. It really went well for me. Like, it's like I get to say everything you want people to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like that's in your heart and in your brain. And it's the soul of everything you want to come out of what you're doing. So really good. Keep up the good work. And I look forward to filling my days by I'm going in to listen to the rest of the podcast. And going to give Kenny a call today, having talked to you. So
yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much. So I will edit this and then I will get you a copy of it. And then you can edit whatever you want out of there. And I'll try to pull, you want me to try to pull the mission statement stuff?
Yeah. You know, I talked a bit about it and we got into it.
Yep.
And that might be a separate edit.
Yep.
Thinking of how can I help Wally sell this exercise?
Absolutely.
To whatever group it is. And don't worry about it being long. I can sub-edit it and private edit it. And like, I might just take that portion. Like I know the why matters is something, I don't know when you said that.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've written down that I'm going to use.
Okay.
But enough of that I might edit, but that would really be appreciated.